Governors advise Biden, talk about abortion, don't talk about Trump. The Democratic governors of the United States boast about their prosperous local economies, attend project ribbon cuttings that are funded by new federal legislation, and have effectively positioned themselves as champions of democracy and abortion rights. In their home states, almost all of them enjoy far greater popularity than the Democratic president they intend to unseat the following year. With re-election in red state Kentucky last month and control of 5 of the 7 most significant presidential battleground states, Democratic governors are riding high while President Biden is stuck in the political mud of low approval ratings and a disgruntled electorate. The governors, like nearly all prominent Democrats, are publicly projecting confidence. In interviews and conversations with 8 governors at their annual winter gathering at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix over the weekend, they expressed on the record optimism that Mr. Biden would win re-election, but also, like many Democrats, some privately acknowledged fears that former President Donald J. Trump could win a rematch with Mr. Biden. They also said that Mr. Biden, at 81 years old, might not compare well with a younger Republican like Nikki Haley, the former United Nations ambassador, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, or even former Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey. The governors offered a series of explanations for Mr. Biden's political struggles and supplied free advice. Here are 6 ways they believe he can raise his standing ahead of next year's election. Talk more about abortion. Mr. Biden barely says the word abortion in his public statements, a fact that frustrates fellow governors hoping he can, as many of them have, use anger over the Supreme Court's 2022 decision overturning Roe v. Wade to improve his political fortunes. We should talk about all the threats to women's health care, including abortion, and use that word specifically, said Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. We should be talking about it like that because Americans are awake. They are angry that this right could be stripped away and we are the only ones fighting for it. On abortion politics, Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey acknowledged that it's widely known that this is probably an uncomfortable reality for him, given that Mr. Biden, a practicing Catholic, once voted in the Senate to let states overturn Roe v. Wade, and his stance on abortion rights has evolved over the years. Mr. Murphy said Mr. Biden must be forthright about discussing the likelihood that Republicans would aim to enact new abortion restrictions if they win control of the federal government in 2024, and emphasizing the Democratic position that decisions about abortion should be left to women and their doctors. That has to be laid out in a much more crystal clear, explicit, affirmative way, he said. Stop talking about Trump. The governors broadly agreed that Mr. Trump would be the Republican nominee. They don't love Mr. Biden's recent turn to focus more attention on his predecessor. You've got to run for something and not against someone, said Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky. That is easy for Mr. Beshear to say. He is among the nation's most popular governors and just won re-election in a deep red state. Governor Laura Kelly of Kansas urged the president to stop talking about Mr. Trump altogether. Be positive, she said, and let others carry the fight to Mr. Trump. If I were in Biden's shoes, I would not talk about Trump, she said. I would let other people talk about Trump. Appeal to moderate Republicans and independents. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota also said Mr. Biden needed to adopt some of Mr. Trump's penchant for bragging. How Times reporters cover politics. Times journalists may vote, but they are not allowed to endorse or campaign for candidates or political causes. That includes participating in rallies and donating money to a candidate or cause. He's been modest for so long, to watch him do it now feels a little uncomfortable, Mr. Walz said. Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina said his constituents were hoping Republicans would nominate someone other than Mr. Trump. Mr. Murphy said hopefully that Republicans supporting someone else in their primary might stay home or wind up voting for Mr. Biden next year. What if Trump is the nominee? What's the behavior pattern among the Haley, DeSantis, and Chris Christie supporters? Where do they go? Mr. Murphy said. I find it hard to believe that a majority of them are going to Trump. Tell people what Biden's done. Governor Gavin Newsom of California, fresh off a primetime Fox News debate against Mr. DeSantis that seemed meant in part to elevate the ambitious Mr. Newsom to the role of Mr. Biden's leading defender, lamented the gap between performance and perception.